In the bustling world of service, where every second counts and every interaction has the potential to shape someone's day, there are moments that go unnoticed. And then, there are moments that change everything. You've probably heard the phrase, "Don't judge a book by its cover." But how often do we actually live by that advice? What happens when someone's accent, something as simple as the way they speak, is used as a weapon to mock and degrade? What if that mockery, that small moment of judgment, uncovered something much deeper than anyone could have imagined? Stick with me because the story you're about to hear is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about judgment, human connection, and the power of secrets. It starts on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon at a small, local diner in a quiet part of town. The kind of diner where the coffee is always hot and the service is always friendly, or at least it's supposed to be. The waitress, Lisa, a young woman in her 20s, had grown used to the rhythms of the job. She knew how to handle the grumpy customers, the ones who'd bark their orders at her with little regard for the fact that she was, well, human. But there was one thing that always seemed to get under her skin, the constant remarks about her accent. She wasn't from around here. Her roots were far away, across the ocean in a country where the pace of life was different, where people spoke with a melody that some people found hard to understand. She didn't mind the occasional question about where she was from. But the mocking tone that accompanied those questions? That was another story. And it wasn't just the customers. It was the way some of her coworkers looked at her too, as though she was somehow inferior, less than, because her accent didn't fit the mold of what they thought was normal. But on that particular Tuesday, something was different. A guest came in that afternoon, and with him, he carried more than just a meal order. He carried a secret, one that would set in motion a series of events that no one, not even Lisa, could have predicted. As she approached his table to take his order, she heard it, the quiet, almost imperceptible snicker that seemed to travel through the air like a ripple in water. A couple of men, sitting at a nearby booth, were laughing under their breath, clearly mocking her accent. One of them whispered something loud enough for her to catch. "Do they teach you to speak like that? Or is it natural?" She paused for a second, her face momentarily flushed with embarrassment, but she was no stranger to this type of cruelty. She simply forced a smile, nodded, and took their orders, but something inside her stirred. It wasn't the first time, but it felt like it might be the last time she'd stand for it. As she returned to the kitchen, her coworker, Sarah, glanced at her with a look of sympathy. "Don't let them get to you," Sarah said softly, but Lisa could see the unease in her eyes. "You know how they are," Lisa nodded, but deep down, she was already tired of letting the small moments slide. She was done with the whispers and the laughing behind her back. She wasn't just going to let them walk all over her anymore. But what was she supposed to do? She had her job to think about, her bills to pay. It was easy for people to tell her to brush it off. But when every day felt like you were just one insult away from losing your grip, it wasn't so simple. What Lisa didn't know, as she quietly cleared the table of the mocking guests and returned to her duties, was that there was something much more significant about that moment than she could have ever imagined. The man sitting alone at the corner booth, who had observed everything quietly, was about to change the course of her life. He was no ordinary customer, not by any means. And he had a secret. The kind of secret that, if revealed, would shake Lisa to her very core. He wasn't just a random guy enjoying a cup of coffee. He had recognized something in her, something that, if she had known earlier, would have completely altered how she saw herself and the world around her. You might be thinking, what could possibly be so special about this man? Well, stick around, because you're about to find out. But here's the kicker. Lisa had no idea who he was. And when he finally spoke to her, it wasn't with the mockery she had grown accustomed to. No, this time it was different. His words were calm, almost as if he was choosing each one carefully, as if he knew exactly how much power they carried. "Lisa," he said, his voice low enough for her to hear but not loud enough to draw attention. "I know what you're going through, and I think it's time you knew the truth." What was he talking about? Truth? Lisa didn't understand, and neither did anyone else around her. But as she stood there, holding her tray, something in her gut told her that she couldn't walk away from this conversation. Something told her that this moment was the beginning of a story she would never forget. The kind of story that could change everything. So, why am I telling you all this? Well, here's the thing. You're here because you want answers. You want to know why Lisa's accent became a point of mockery, and you want to know what secret this mysterious guest was hiding. More importantly, you want to know how it all fits together, how this man's secret could possibly unveil a hidden part of Lisa's past that she didn't even know existed. This is a story about more than just an accent or a few rude customers. It's about identity, about how people shape who we are based on the things we can't control, and about how those same people might be the ones who unknowingly change our lives forever. Now, I could tell you everything right now, but what's the fun in that? Instead, I want you to stick with me. Trust me when I say the twist at the end of this story is something you'll never see coming. It's the kind of twist that will make you question everything, make you rethink the way you judge people, and make you realize that sometimes the loudest mockery hides the deepest secrets. So, go ahead, grab a seat, get comfortable, and stay with me until the very end. Because I promise you, you won't want to miss how this story unfolds. It's time to unravel the mystery, and trust me, you're not going to want to look away. Lisa's life wasn't what anyone would call easy. Most people saw her as just another waitress at a small diner, going through the motions of her job, always polite, always helpful, always there when people needed her. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't possibly understand, was the weight she carried, the invisible burden of being an outsider in a place that had never fully embraced her. It wasn't just the mocking comments or the constant sense that she didn't belong. It was the feeling that her life had somehow been put on a path she never chose, one that was shaped by forces beyond her control. She'd come to this town with nothing but a suitcase and a dream of building a better future for herself, but dreams, as she had come to learn, had a way of crumbling under the pressure of reality. Her family had been gone for years, and her ties to her homeland were nothing more than distant memories. She hadn't been back home in over 5 years, too caught up in the struggle of trying to make ends meet and prove that she could survive on her own. The diner was her refuge, the one constant in a life that seemed full of change and uncertainty. But lately, things had been shifting. It wasn't just the teasing about her accent, though that had reached new levels of cruelty. No, it was something deeper, something that had started to fester beneath the surface. Lisa had always kept to herself. She didn't have many friends in the town, and the ones she did have were mostly acquaintances, people she passed the time with during slow shifts, people who knew her only by her job and not by the person she truly was. There was Sarah, of course, who worked alongside her, and Lisa considered her a friend, but even their conversations were shallow at best. Sarah was nice, but she had her own life to focus on, her own worries. And then there was Jake, the regular who always sat in the same booth, nursing his coffee and staring out the window. He'd always been kind to her, though he didn't know much about her outside of the fact that she worked at the diner. He'd once asked if she was okay, but she'd brushed it off, not wanting to get into the complicated mess of her personal life. But recently, there had been a strange tension between them. Lisa couldn't explain it, but something about Jake's behavior had started to feel off. He'd been visiting the diner more frequently, ordering the same thing, a black coffee and a slice of pie, and while he was always polite, there was an intensity in his gaze that she couldn't quite place. He would watch her from across the room, his eyes lingering just a little too long, his smile just a little too forced. It wasn't the kind of friendly attention she was used to. It was more like he was trying to piece together a puzzle, one that she had no idea existed. And then there was that guest, the man who had watched the whole scene unfold with such calm. His name was Henry, though he hadn't introduced himself to her beyond that brief exchange. There was something about him that made Lisa uneasy. He had a way of looking at people, of listening with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as though he could see straight through her, as if he knew exactly who she was and, more importantly, what she was hiding. At first, she had chalked it up to nothing more than a strange coincidence, but the more she thought about their brief conversation, the more she realized that he knew far more than he was letting on. What did he mean when he said, "I know what you're going through"? How could he possibly know what it was like to be in her shoes? And then, when he spoke about the truth, Lisa's mind raced with possibilities. What truth? She couldn't understand what he was implying, but the weight of his words clung to her, nagging at her as she tried to go about her day. What did he want from her? Why was he so intent on making contact with her? Was this some kind of setup? Was he part of some scheme, or was there something else going on? It wasn't just Henry's cryptic message that had her on edge. Over the past few weeks, there had been strange occurrences, things that didn't quite make sense. The first thing was the late-night phone calls. They had started about a month ago with no caller ID, and at first, Lisa thought it was just some prankster. But the calls had become more frequent, and the voice on the other end had grown more familiar. The first time she picked up, the voice had asked her, "Do you remember me?" When she tried to ask who it was, the caller hung up. After that, there was a series of missed calls, all coming at odd hours of the night. The voice had stopped speaking, but Lisa could swear she heard someone breathing, waiting, as if they were trying to catch her off guard. It was unnerving. But what really threw her off was the day she found a small, old photograph tucked into her locker at work. It was a picture of a woman she didn't recognize, standing with a man and a small child, all of them smiling in a way that seemed oddly familiar. There was no note, no explanation, just the photograph. She didn't want to think about it too much, but it was hard not to wonder who had left it for her and why. It felt like someone was watching her, always just one step ahead, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone knew something about her past that she had kept hidden for so long. And then there was the fact that Henry, the guest from earlier, seemed to have some kind of connection to this all. His calm demeanor wasn't the only thing that had unnerved Lisa. When she turned to leave his table after their conversation, she had caught a glimpse of something in his coat pocket, something that looked suspiciously like a photograph. A photograph with the same worn edges, the same faded quality as the one she had found in her locker. But why would he have a photo like that? Could it be possible that he was the one who had been leaving her these cryptic clues, these pieces of a puzzle she couldn't even begin to solve? The more she tried to dismiss it, the more the questions swirled in her mind. Who was Henry really? Was he someone from her past, someone who knew things she had buried long ago? Or was he simply another stranger trying to make her life more complicated than it already was? The pieces were there, but they didn't fit together, not yet. And then, just as she thought she might be losing her mind, there was a knock on the door, the sound cutting through the silence of the empty diner. Lisa froze, her heart skipping a beat. It was late, well after closing hours. Who could be here at this hour? She slowly walked toward the door, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. When she opened it, there was no one there, only a small envelope, left on the doorstep. She bent down to pick it up, and her breath caught in her throat when she saw the name written on the front. It wasn't her name. It was someone else's. And that's when Lisa realized someone was playing a game with her. A game she didn't understand. And worse, she didn't know if she could win. Lisa stood frozen, her fingers trembling slightly as she stared at the envelope in her hands. There was something unsettling about it. The name on the front wasn't hers, and it certainly wasn't anyone she recognized. But what made her stomach churn wasn't the unfamiliar name. It was the feeling that the game had escalated beyond anything she could have anticipated. The envelope was thick, almost as if it contained more than just a letter. Hesitantly, she slid her finger under the flap, carefully prying it open. Inside was a folded piece of paper, along with something else, a small, silver key, tarnished with age, but still unmistakably real. The paper had only one line written on it: "Find the lock before they find you." No other explanation, no further instructions. Just those cryptic words. She felt a knot form in her stomach, the urgency of the message sinking in. Who had sent this? And what lock was she supposed to find? For a moment, she stood there, feeling a rush of panic rising in her chest. This wasn't some random prank or a misguided attempt at humor. The envelope, the key, the message, it was all too intentional, too deliberate to ignore. But as her mind raced through possible answers, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. The fear gnawed at her, but there was also something else, a feeling she couldn't quite place, but that felt almost like determination. She couldn't back down now, not when she was so close to uncovering something that felt so deeply connected to her past. The next day at work, the tension only intensified. Every glance from her coworkers felt loaded with suspicion. Every word exchanged felt like it held a hidden meaning. Sarah, her one reliable friend at the diner, had been acting strange. She wasn't her usual self, and Lisa couldn't help but notice how Sarah kept glancing at the door, as if waiting for someone. When Lisa approached her for a quick chat during a lull in the afternoon rush, Sarah's response was clipped, almost dismissive. "Hey, everything okay?" Lisa asked, trying to gauge the sudden shift in her behavior. Sarah's eyes darted around the room before she answered. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, you know?" Lisa frowned, but before she could ask more, Sarah quickly changed the subject, asking about a new customer who had just walked in. Something about the exchange didn't sit right with Lisa, but she brushed it off, assuming she was overthinking things. After all, she had more pressing matters to deal with, like the mysterious envelope and the cryptic message that haunted her thoughts. It wasn't long after that when things started to take a turn for the worse. As the evening wore on and the diner quieted down, Lisa found herself alone in the back office, trying to make sense of the key and the message. She had pulled out a small notebook and was scribbling down possible connections when a strange noise caught her attention, the sound of footsteps outside the office door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and yet the footsteps were too deliberate, too heavy to be anyone just passing by. Her heart raced as she stood up and cautiously walked to the door, trying to peek through the small crack. But when she opened it, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, as if whoever had been walking had vanished into thin air. Confused and slightly shaken, Lisa stepped back inside the office, locking the door behind her. She glanced over at the desk, her eyes falling on the notebook where she had been writing down her thoughts. And that's when she saw it. The notebook was gone. Just gone. There had been no one in the office, and yet the pages where she had been feverishly writing were now missing. The notebook wasn't anywhere in the room. Panic flared in her chest as she rifled through the desk drawers, checked under the papers, but there was nothing. The pages had vanished without a trace, and with them, the notes she had painstakingly compiled about the mystery. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, each piece of the puzzle slipping further and further away. Had someone been in here? Had someone taken the notebook? Or was it just another mind game designed to throw her off the scent? Her thoughts were swirling, and with each passing second, the walls seemed to close in around her. It was as if she was being trapped in a game she didn't understand, and every time she thought she was getting closer to the truth, the ground was pulled out from under her. Lisa left the office in a daze, her mind racing. She didn't know who to trust anymore, and as she walked back into the main dining area, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There, sitting at the counter as if nothing was out of the ordinary, was Henry, the guest who had given her that cryptic warning just days before. He was staring at her, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made her stop in her tracks. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was part of this, part of whatever was happening to her. Her feet moved involuntarily, drawing her closer to him. She couldn't help it. She needed answers. She had to confront him. But as she opened her mouth to speak, the door to the diner swung open, and in walked another figure, a man she hadn't seen before. He was tall, dark-haired, with an air of quiet confidence that made her stomach turn. He had an unsettling presence, one that seemed to command attention without a word. His eyes swept the room, landing on Lisa, and something passed between them, some unspoken connection that sent a chill down her spine. Henry didn't move, didn't even flinch when the man entered. Instead, he just sat there, sipping his coffee, as if he already knew this was going to happen. Lisa's mind raced, trying to piece together who this new person could be. Was he part of the game too? Or was he another obstacle, another force trying to keep her from uncovering the truth? Just as Lisa was about to approach Henry, the new man walked up to the counter and spoke directly to her, his voice smooth and calm. "You've been digging around, haven't you? You shouldn't." His words sent a shiver down her spine. "What do you mean?" she managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made her blood run cold. Some things are better left untouched, Lisa. Trust me. If you keep looking, you'll regret it. His warning hung in the air, thick with tension, and for the first time, Lisa felt a true sense of fear settle into her bones. Who was this man, and what did he know that she didn't? Was he a friend? A foe? Or something far more dangerous? Before she could ask anything more, the man turned and walked out of the diner, leaving Lisa standing there, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind reeling with questions. What was she supposed to do now? Was she truly ready to face whatever truths lay hidden in her past? And was there anyone she could trust to help her find the answers? The mystery had only deepened, and Lisa knew one thing for certain. She was now in way over her head. The following days seemed to blur together for Lisa, each one filled with more questions than answers. As she tried to make sense of the cryptic warning from the mysterious man, her thoughts kept circling back to the envelope, the key, and that haunting message. Find the lock before they find you. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something, a crucial piece of the puzzle that would tie everything together. The diner had become a place of tension, with the staff looking at her in ways that made her wonder if they knew more than they let on. It wasn't just the strange occurrences or the unsettling interactions with Henry and the mysterious man. It was the fact that every time she thought she was getting closer to the truth, something or someone seemed to block her path. And then it happened again. Late one evening, just as Lisa was about to close up the diner, Sarah approached her with a hesitant look on her face, the kind of look that made Lisa's heart skip a beat. Sarah had been quiet for days, her usual bubbly demeanor replaced with a noticeable unease. Lisa had tried to brush it off, but now, standing in front of her, Sarah seemed different. Her hands were shaking, and her eyes darted around the room, as if she was afraid someone might be watching them. "Lisa," Sarah began, her voice barely a whisper, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have said before, but I've been scared." Lisa's mind raced. What could Sarah possibly be talking about? Sarah had always been the one person she felt she could rely on, the one who had been there when the teasing about her accent got too much to bear, the one who had listened when Lisa needed someone to talk to. But now, Sarah's hesitation made Lisa's gut twist. "What's going on?" Lisa asked, her voice steady, though inside, she was already bracing for something unexpected. Sarah took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I know what you've been looking into. I know about the key and the messages. And I think you're in danger." She hesitated again, wringing her hands. "You weren't the only one who got a message." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? What message?" Sarah seemed to struggle with her words, her anxiety clearly growing. "A few days ago, I found something, a letter just like yours. I didn't tell you because I thought it was just a prank, but now," she trailed off, shaking her head as though the words were too heavy to say. "Now, I'm not so sure." It said the same thing. "Find the lock before they find you." It was addressed to me, not you, but the handwriting was the same. And there was a key with it just like yours. Lisa felt a chill run through her body as Sarah's words sank in. This wasn't just about her anymore. Whoever was behind this, whoever had been orchestrating this twisted game, had targeted Sarah too. Lisa's mind whirled as she tried to process the revelation. Why would someone send a message to Sarah? What connection did she have to this mystery? And why hadn't Sarah said anything sooner? Lisa could feel her pulse quicken, the sense of unease turning into something more tangible, something she couldn't ignore. "I didn't want to get involved," Sarah continued, her voice shaky. "But I've been feeling like someone's been watching me too. I thought it was just stress or paranoia, but now I'm not so sure. I've seen people lurking outside my apartment, and I've heard noises in the hallway at night. I didn't want to tell you, because I didn't want to drag you deeper into this. But I think we're in this together now, whether we like it or not." Lisa's mind raced. Was this really happening? Was Sarah being dragged into something dangerous just because she was close to Lisa? But before Lisa could respond, there was a loud knock at the door, followed by a voice that sent a jolt of panic through her. "Lisa," the voice called from outside, unmistakably Henry's. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Lisa's heart pounded as she turned to Sarah, who looked just as nervous as she felt. What was Henry doing here? Why was he suddenly so insistent on talking to her? She knew she couldn't ignore him, not after everything that had happened, but every instinct told her that speaking with him would only complicate things further. Sarah's eyes widened in fear, and she quickly glanced toward the door. You shouldn't let him in, Lisa. Whatever he's involved in, it's bigger hit than you think. But Lisa couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. Henry had already played a role in all of this, and if he knew anything that could help her figure out what was really going on, she had to listen. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward the door, but just as her hand touched the handle, she froze. There, lying on the ground in front of the door, was another envelope. This one was different. It was stained with what looked like a dark, reddish-brown liquid, and the paper was crinkled, as if it had been handled by someone in a hurry. Lisa bent down to pick it up, and when she saw the contents inside, her blood ran cold. It wasn't a letter this time. Instead, there was a photo of her, but not one she recognized. It was a picture of her from years ago, taken in a place she hadn't been in a long time, the old family house, the one she had left behind when she ran away all those years ago. She hadn't thought about it in ages, not since everything had gone wrong. How could someone have known about that place, about her past? But it wasn't just the photo that made her feel sick. It was the note attached to it. It read simply, "She knows more than you think, and so do you." Her hands trembled as she held the picture in front of her, trying to make sense of it. Why was someone bringing up her past now? Why was her family home, the place she had tried so hard to forget, suddenly being dragged back into her life? And who is this she in the note? The words felt like a threat, like a warning to stop digging, to stop asking questions. Lisa's heart pounded as the walls seemed to close in around her. This wasn't just about the present anymore. This was about something far deeper, something buried in her past, something she wasn't ready to face. And just when she thought she might be able to make sense of it all, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. She turned around quickly, but no one was there. It was the same heavy, deliberate footsteps she had heard the other night, the ones that had haunted her when she was alone in the office. But this time, the footsteps were closer, much closer. The stakes had just been raised, and Lisa realized, with a sickening certainty, that someone was closing in on her. The question now was, who could she trust, and how far was she willing to go to uncover the truth? The days that followed felt like they were happening in a fog, each one blurring into the next as Lisa tried to keep it all together. Her mind was a constant whirlpool of thoughts, the cryptic messages, the mysterious key, the strange figures who seemed to be lurking just beyond her reach. But there was something more, something that had shifted the course of everything she thought she knew. It was the unease, the sense that someone was watching her at all times, no matter where she went. She couldn't shake the feeling that every corner she turned, every shadow she passed, was hiding someone who knew more than they let on. It was late one evening when the dread finally reached its breaking point. Lisa had been walking home from the diner, the empty streets stretching out in front of her, the cool air sharp against her skin. She had become accustomed to the quiet, to the stillness of the night, but tonight, something felt different. She wasn't alone. It wasn't a feeling of company, no, it was something far darker. It was as if the very ground she walked on was aware of her fear, as if the concrete beneath her feet was conspiring to make her feel the weight of what she was trying to outrun. As she passed a row of parked cars, she felt it, the distinct sensation that someone was following her. A slight rustling sound, the scrape of shoes against the pavement. She quickened her pace, glancing over her shoulder. Nothing. No one in sight. But the feeling wouldn't leave, and it seemed to grow stronger with every step. The rustling continued, faint but constant, as though someone was staying just out of sight, staying close enough to keep her within reach. She turned a corner, her heart hammering in her chest, but again, when she looked, the street was empty. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. She was certain now. Someone was following her, but they weren't making themselves known. She couldn't help but imagine the worst. What did they want? What were they waiting for? Her stomach twisted in knots, And for the first time since this entire ordeal had begun, she realized with absolute clarity just how deep she was in this, how far things had already gone, how little control she had over anything. She began to walk faster, the sound of her footsteps growing louder against the silence of the night. She could feel the panic bubbling up inside her, threatening to overtake her reason. But just as she was about to break into a run, a voice broke through the dark, low and calm, but with an edge that made her freeze. "Lisa, don't run." It was Henry. Her heart dropped, and she spun around, startled to find him standing there, leaning casually against the lamppost. How had he gotten there? She hadn't heard his footsteps, hadn't seen him approach. Had he been following her all along? His presence in that moment made her feel more trapped than ever, like the walls were closing in on her from all sides. "Why are you following me?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite her efforts to sound confident. Henry gave her a half-smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were cold, distant, as if he wasn't really seeing her at all. "I'm not following you, Lisa. I'm here because I think you're in danger, and you're not going to get out of this alone." He paused, studying her for a long moment before adding, "It's too late for that now." Lisa's stomach churned. "What do you mean by that?" But before Henry could respond, her phone rang, cutting through the tension. She glanced down at the screen, her heart racing. It was Sarah. She quickly answered, her voice trembling with anxiety. "Sarah? What's going on? Is everything okay?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a silence that stretched far too long. When Sarah's voice finally came through, it was shaky, filled with raw fear. "Lisa, I don't know how to say this, but it's gone. Everything's gone. The apartment, my things, they're all gone." Lisa's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, gone? What happened?" I don't know. I came home tonight and the door was wide open. All my stuff is gone, my clothes, my things, everything. But the worst part? I found something in the kitchen. It was a note, Lisa, a note just like the one you found. She knows more than you think. And so do you. It was signed with a symbol I've never seen before. I don't know what's going on, but I'm scared, Lisa. They're not just watching you anymore. They're watching both of us. Lisa's blood ran cold, and she felt her body go numb. "Sarah, listen to me. You need to leave, get out of there, right now. I'm coming to get you." But Sarah's voice cracked, filled with fear and desperation. "I don't know where to go, Lisa. I don't know what to do. They're already here. They've been here all along." Before Lisa could respond, the line went dead. Her phone screen flickered, and then went black. A chilling silence fell over her, broken only by the sound of her own breathing. Her entire body trembled as she looked up at Henry, who hadn't moved, hadn't even flinched at the conversation. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them said a word. The weight of what Sarah had just told her pressed down on Lisa, a crushing force that made it hard to breathe. Sarah was in danger. She was in danger, and there was no one she could trust. "Where is she?" Lisa finally asked, her voice sharp with urgency, her panic now reaching its peak. Henry's eyes darkened, and he stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not going to find her tonight. You can't help her if you don't understand what's really going on, Lisa. You're in over your head, and you've been digging in places you don't belong." Lisa took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you mean by that? What is all of this? Who are you really?" Henry didn't answer. Instead, he just stood there looking at her, as if weighing his next move. And in that moment, Lisa realized with a jolt that she was truly alone in this. The people she thought she could rely on had either disappeared or had become part of the web of deception she was trapped in. Her phone rang again, pulling her from her thoughts. This time, the caller ID was blocked, and when she answered, a cold voice came through the line, smooth and unrecognizable. "Lisa," the voice said, a hint of amusement in the tone. "You think you're getting closer to the truth, but you're not. You're just walking deeper into the dark. We've been watching you, and we've already decided. You can't stop what's coming." The line went dead again, and Lisa's legs nearly gave way beneath her. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she stood there in the darkness, the weight of the situation crashing down on her. Her friend was gone, and the person on the other end of the phone, whoever they were, was toying with her. The walls were closing in, and Lisa could feel the darkness pressing in all around her. She was running out of time, but the question now was, who could she trust to help her find Sarah? And would she even make it out alive before the game that had been set into motion reached its terrifying conclusion? Lisa's mind raced as the weight of the conversation with Henry sank in, but a nagging feeling gnawed at her. The more she thought about it, the more something fell off, like a missing piece of the puzzle that had been right under her nose the entire time. Everything she thought she understood about the situation seemed to be built on shaky ground, and the terrifying reality was that she had no idea who or what she could trust anymore. She glanced back at Henry, who still hadn't moved, his gaze fixed on her with a kind of unsettling calm that made her skin crawl. He was hiding something, that much was clear. But the more she tried to piece together the clues, the more the picture shifted in ways she didn't understand. It wasn't until hours later, when she sat alone in her apartment, the light from her phone screen the only thing illuminating the dark room, that the true horror of the situation began to unfold. Lisa's hands shook as she scrolled through her messages. There was nothing. No new leads, no answers, just dead ends. The silence between her and Sarah was deafening, and every minute that passed without hearing from her friend only deepened the pit of dread in her stomach. But then something caught her eye. An old message, one she had missed in the chaos of everything going on. It was from her mother. The message had been sent weeks ago, right before the mystery had started to unfold, and it was just a simple text. Stay away from the diner, Lisa. Don't trust them. At the time, she had dismissed it as just another one of her mother's cryptic warnings, something she'd been used to growing up. But now, with everything that had happened, it hit her like a bolt of lightning. Why would her mother send her a message like that? The diner wasn't just a place of work. It was her home. Her mother had known about it, even though she hadn't been in contact for years. And she had warned her to stay away. Her pulse quickened as she scrolled through her phone, going back even further, searching for any clue that might explain this sudden message. That was when she found it, an old photo. It was from a time she barely remembered, a family vacation from years ago, one of the last times she had seen her mother before she disappeared from her life. In the picture, Lisa was sitting at a table in the diner, laughing with Sarah. But there was something else in the background, something Lisa had never noticed before, a man. He was standing at the counter, half shrouded in shadow, but Lisa recognized his face immediately. It was Henry. Her heart sank into her stomach as she stared at the photo. Henry had been in her life long before the events of the past few weeks. But how? How is it possible that he had been there, in the background of her life, so many years ago? Was he involved in her mother's disappearance? And why hadn't she seen it before? With trembling hands, Lisa began to replay the events in her mind, searching for anything she might have missed. Henry's sudden interest in her, his insistence on getting involved, the cryptic warnings. It all pointed to something far more sinister than she had realized. But there was one thing that kept gnawing at her, Sarah. Why had Sarah been so terrified? Why had she warned her to stay away from Henry? Lisa's phone buzzed, snapping her out of her spiraling thoughts. It was a new message, and for a fleeting moment, she thought it might be Sarah, finally reaching out. But when she opened it, her stomach dropped. It was a video, sent from an unknown number. Lisa pressed play, her heart pounding as the screen came to life. The footage was shaky at first, but it quickly steadied. What she saw made her blood run cold. It was Sarah, but she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was Henry, his face eerily calm, but what chilled Lisa to the bone was the expression on Sarah's face. She was terrified. And in the background, a man Lisa had never seen before stood watching them both, his eyes cold and calculating. The man held something in his hand, the same key that had been sent to Lisa. The video continued, and Lisa watched in horror as the man spoke, his voice deep and menacing. She's already too far gone. We can't let her expose us now. The screen went black. Lisa sat frozen, unable to move, her mind struggling to comprehend what she had just seen. Henry had been working with Sarah all along. They weren't just connected to the mystery, they were the mystery. The puzzle pieces fell into place in an instant, and what she had once thought was a game of hidden clues and mysterious messages was in fact something far darker, far more calculated. The key, the messages, the warnings, they weren't just about protecting her. They were about controlling her. And her mother's disappearance wasn't the only secret buried in the past. Henry had been orchestrating everything, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, and now Sarah was caught in the web, whether she realized it or not. Lisa's thoughts spiraled as she realized the depth of the deception. Everything she thought she knew was a lie, and the people she had trusted most were no longer who they appeared to be. The phone call with Sarah, the mysterious note at her apartment, even the messages that had once seemed like warnings, they were all part of the plan. The plan to make Lisa question everything, to make her vulnerable, to make her play into the hands of those who had been pulling the strings from the very beginning. Her breath quickened as the full weight of the situation settled on her. Henry wasn't just a mysterious man from her past. He was part of something much larger, something more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. And Sarah? She wasn't just a victim in this. She was a pawn, a piece in a game that Lisa had unknowingly been drawn into. The ground beneath her felt unstable, and Lisa knew, with a sickening certainty, that the worst was yet to come. The only question now was, who could she trust, and how far was she willing to go to uncover the truth? The stakes had never been higher, and the answers seemed further out of reach than ever. Lisa couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Sarah, terrified and trapped, haunted her. The video played over and over in her mind, each frame locking into place as more pieces of the puzzle slid into view. But there was one part of the video that stood out above all the rest, the cold, calculating expression on Henry's face. He was the key, and she now understood just how deep his involvement went. The fear that had once felt like an overreaction was now a crushing, undeniable truth. Henry wasn't just connected to the mystery, he was the center of it all. But how could she confront him? How could she accuse someone who had been by her side, who had acted like a protector, of being the architect of everything she had feared? The weight of it crushed her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt completely powerless, as if the ground beneath her feet was collapsing, leaving her with no solid footing. And yet, deep down, she knew there was no turning back. The stakes were higher than ever before, and she had to make a choice. The truth or her safety. The phone buzzed again and Lisa's hands froze. Another message. She opened it slowly, dreading what might be inside. It was a simple text, but it made her blood run cold. You know where to find her. But do you have the courage to uncover the truth? It's all in your hands now. It was from an unknown number, but the words felt like a direct challenge. Lisa's pulse quickened. The truth was right there, slipping through her fingers like sand, but the cost of it felt like it might be too high. How far would she go to get to the bottom of this? Would it be worth it if it meant losing everything? She sat there, staring at the screen for what felt like an eternity, her mind torn between the desire to run, to escape, and the need to uncover every dark secret Henry had buried. And then it hit her. There was only one way forward. She had to confront him. But confronting him meant walking directly into the heart of the storm, and she had no idea if she would make it out alive. Lisa's heart raced as she drove to Henry's apartment. The late-night streets were empty, almost eerily so, and the silence pressed down on her, amplifying every thought and every fear. She thought about the messages she had received, the cryptic warnings, the broken pieces of her past that had suddenly resurfaced. Each new revelation only made the darkness deeper, the danger more real. It wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about her life, her future, and everything she had ever believed in being called into question. When she arrived at his apartment complex, her hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold the car keys. She sat there for a moment, the engine running, trying to steady her breath. But it was pointless. There was no turning back now. No matter how much she wanted to run, no matter how much her instincts screamed at her to protect herself, Lisa knew she couldn't. The truth had already chosen her, and there was no escaping it. As she approached his door, she noticed the faint light coming from inside. He was there, waiting. Her breath caught in her throat as she raised her hand to knock, but the door creaked open before she could. There he was, standing in the doorway, his face unreadable, his posture relaxed as if nothing had changed, as if they were still just two old friends meeting for a casual conversation. But Lisa knew better now. There was no such thing as casual with Henry anymore. "Lisa," he said, his voice low, almost soothing. "I knew you'd come eventually. You're in deeper than you realize, but I think you know that by now." Her heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. The words were there, swirling in her mind, but they felt like they were stuck in her throat, trapped by the weight of everything she needed to ask. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes fixed on his. "Why, Henry? Why did you do this? Why are you involved with all of this? What do you want from me?" He didn't flinch. In fact, he smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made her skin crawl. "I've been trying to protect you, Lisa. Everything I've done, everything I've guided you through, it was all for you. But you've been too blind to see it." "Protect me?" she repeated, her voice rising with the frustration and anger that had been building up inside her. "This isn't protection, Henry. This is manipulation. You've been controlling everything, pulling the strings, and I didn't even see it. You knew about Sarah. You knew what was happening to her, and you didn't do anything. You let it happen." "Don't be naive, Lisa," Henry said, his voice hardening now. "There are forces in motion that you couldn't possibly understand. If I didn't intervene, if I didn't guide things, things would have been far worse. You're not ready for the truth. You're not prepared for what comes next." His words hit her like a slap to the face, and for a moment, she was lost, unsure of what to believe. Could she trust him? Could she trust anything he said? Everything he had told her up until now had been a lie. Or had it? Was there more to this than she realized? Was there something bigger, something she was missing? "I'm ready to know the truth," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want the truth, Henry. All of it." Henry's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, she saw something darker flicker in them, something cold and calculating. "You're not ready for this, Lisa. You think you want the truth, but the moment you see it, you'll wish you hadn't. You'll wish you could go back to living in the dark, believing in the lies that made you feel safe." He stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. The chill that crept over her made her hesitate for a second, but then she walked inside, determined to face whatever lay ahead. As soon as the door closed behind her, Henry spoke again, his voice low and serious. "There's no going back now. I've kept you safe this long, but the decisions you make from here on out will determine everything. You'll have to choose, Lisa. Choose between the truth and your safety. Between your life and what's left of it." Lisa's breath caught. The words felt like a trap, like the weight of her entire world was now resting on the edge of a knife. She could feel the danger in every word, every choice. And yet, there was a part of her that knew, that deep, gut-wrenching part of her, that if she didn't uncover the truth, she would never be able to live with herself. But the cost of knowing it, of truly understanding what had been going on behind the scenes, might be more than she was willing to pay. Henry's eyes never left her as she stood frozen in the room, the full weight of the impossible decision pressing down on her. There was no easy way out, and the road ahead was filled with uncertainty. The truth, she now realized, was a dangerous thing to pursue. But could she really walk away from it? Could she live with the lies for the rest of her life? The time for choosing was now. And whatever she decided, she knew there would be no turning back. Lisa's mind raced as Henry's words echoed in her ears, his calm demeanor now only adding to the overwhelming sense of dread closing in on her. As he continued speaking, his voice lowered, taking on an almost sinister edge, and the walls around her seemed to tighten. "You're playing a dangerous game, Lisa. You think you're in control, but you're not. You never were." His eyes were cold, and for the first time, she saw the predator behind the facade of the man who had been a friend, a protector. The realization hit her like a wave. Henry wasn't just part of this conspiracy, he was its architect. But what terrified Lisa more than his revelation was the growing sense that this was bigger than anything she could have imagined. Henry wasn't acting alone. The people she thought she knew, the ones she trusted, had been carefully manipulated into positions, each one playing their part in this web of lies and deceit. She had been nothing more than a pawn in a game far larger than her, one that had been set into motion long before she ever set foot in that diner. Her life, her past, even the very friendships she had taken for granted, had all been part of the design. Henry stepped closer, his expression dark and unreadable. "You want to know the truth? The truth is, you've been living a lie. Your mother wasn't just some random woman with a warning. She was involved. In ways you can't even begin to understand." His words struck Lisa like a blow to the chest. Her heart skipped a beat. Everything she had believed in, everything she had worked so hard to piece together, suddenly felt like it was crumbling beneath her. Was her mother complicit in this conspiracy? Was she somehow tied to the darkness that had been closing in on Lisa for weeks? "You think Sarah's scared of me?" Henry's voice cut through the storm of thoughts raging in Lisa's mind. "She's terrified of the people I work for. And you should be too." Lisa's legs almost buckled as the weight of his words settled into her bones. She had always assumed that Henry was the mastermind, the one orchestrating the puzzle. But now, it was becoming painfully clear. He was merely a cog in a much larger machine. A machine that had been running long before her involvement, long before Sarah's desperate warnings, and long before Lisa had any idea that her life was already being written for her. But who were these people? What did they want from her? And why had they gone to such lengths to involve her? The room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension, and Lisa's thoughts were jumbled as she tried to make sense of it all. But there was one question that burned brighter than the rest. Why her? Why was she the one being targeted? Her mother's cryptic warning, the key, the strange messages, it was all connected. But the pieces were slipping through her fingers, like sand in the wind. As if reading her mind, Henry spoke again, his voice now heavy with menace. "You think you're the first one to ask these questions, Lisa? You think you're the first person to try and piece together the lies? There's a reason your mother's gone. There's a reason Sarah's in hiding. And there's a reason you're standing here right now." Before she could respond, the door burst open behind her, and Lisa spun around, her heart pounding in her chest. Standing there, his eyes wide with fear, was another face she never thought she'd see again. A face she trusted, a face she had thought was her ally. It was Tom, Sarah's brother. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. Lisa's breath caught in her throat as she saw the fear in his eyes, the way his hands trembled. "Lisa, you need to get out of here. Now. It's not safe." Lisa stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. Tom had always been a part of her life, a person who had been there for Sarah, for her. And now he was warning her to run? Everything was falling apart. Every person she thought she could trust was slipping through her fingers like smoke. But then the realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Henry wasn't working alone. Tom wasn't working alone either. The room, the secrets, the lies, it wasn't just about her anymore. There were others involved, hidden deep in the shadows, pulling the strings. Lisa's entire life had been a lie, a carefully constructed narrative that was now unraveling at a terrifying speed. People she trusted, people she loved, were part of a conspiracy that was far bigger than she ever imagined. As Tom stepped forward, his eyes frantic, he dropped a bombshell that made Lisa's blood run cold. "They've already been watching you. They know everything you've been doing, everything you've discovered. They're closing in on you, and they won't stop until they have you." Lisa's mind was reeling, unable to process the enormity of what was happening. But before she could ask him what he meant, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy and purposeful. Someone was coming. Someone who knew exactly where she was, someone who had been tracking her every move. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and for the first time, she felt a genuine sense of terror. This was no longer a mystery she could solve. This was her life on the line. Without thinking, Lisa grabbed Tom's arm, her voice shaking as she whispered, "We need to go. Now." But Tom pulled away from her, his face twisted in pain. "I can't," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been part of this from the beginning. I've been working with them all along." The betrayal hit her like a freight train, leaving her breathless, lost. Tom, the person who had been there for her, and Sarah, the person who had shared her fears and secrets, he was part of it all. The shock was unbearable, and for a moment, Lisa couldn't breathe. The one person she thought she could trust, the one person who was supposed to protect Sarah and her, had been working for the enemy all along. "You don't understand, Lisa," Tom continued, his voice breaking. "I didn't have a choice. They have Sarah. They have her, and if I didn't do what they said, they'd kill her." Lisa's heart sank as the full weight of his words hit her. This was bigger than she ever thought, bigger than anything she had ever imagined. The stakes had never been higher, and now, everything she had ever believed in was shattered. The conspiracy, the lies, the manipulations, it was all tied together in ways that were impossible to untangle. She was in deeper than she ever realized, and there was no way out now. As the footsteps drew closer, Lisa's chest tightened, panic flooding her mind. She had to act fast. She had to find a way to escape, to survive, and to uncover the truth. But at what cost? The danger was real now, and the clock was ticking. The air was thick with tension as Lisa stared at Tom, her heart racing in her chest, barely able to comprehend the gravity of his confession. The footsteps grew louder, a rhythmic thud that echoed down the hallway, each one a reminder of the imminent danger closing in around them. Tom's face was pale, his eyes filled with guilt, but it was his final words that weighed the most. He wasn't just a bystander in this twisted web. He was an active participant, an unwilling pawn in a game far darker than Lisa had ever imagined. Sarah, her sister, had been taken. And now Lisa was the target. The truth had been buried so deeply, she could barely see the surface. The very fabric of her life was crumbling, unraveling faster than she could catch her breath. "We need to go," Lisa said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and desperation. She turned toward the exit, but something held her back, a pull, deep within her gut, telling her that running wasn't the answer. Not this time. The truth was within reach, and it had been all along, tucked away just beneath the surface, hiding in plain sight. She could feel it in her bones. The pieces were about to fall into place, but she needed to confront the man at the center of it all. The man who had orchestrated this entire nightmare. The door to the room slammed open with a deafening crash. Henry stepped inside, his cold gaze sweeping over the scene, a twisted smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Did you really think you could outsmart me, Lisa?" His voice was dripping with contempt, each word calculated to pierce her resolve. He walked toward her slowly, his steps measured, deliberate. Lisa could feel the weight of his presence, like a heavy fog settling over her, choking her ability to think clearly. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the last few hours, but the answer, the one thing she had missed, was finally dawning on her. This wasn't just about Sarah or Tom or even herself. This was about control. Power. And Henry was the puppet master. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he continued, his voice now a low whisper. "The conspiracy wasn't about you, Lisa. It was never about you. It was about something far bigger, something far more dangerous." Lisa's mind was spinning as she tried to make sense of his words, but it was the final piece of the puzzle that snapped into place. Her mother hadn't just been trying to warn her, she had been trying to protect her. She had known about Henry, known about the organization he worked for, and most importantly, she had known that Lisa was the key to everything. The one person who could unravel the truth, the one person who could expose them all. And that was why they had targeted her. They had orchestrated every move, manipulated every relationship, all to make sure she would end up in this very moment, trapped in a room with a man who is now her worst enemy. As Lisa's mind raced to process the realization, Henry took another step toward her, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You still don't get it, do you? Your mother was the one who brought you into this. You think she died because of some random accident? No. She was murdered, Lisa. And it was all because of you." The words hit Lisa like a physical blow, leaving her breathless. Her mother had been murdered? The woman she had spent years grieving, the woman whose death had haunted her every waking moment. Had it been part of this game all along? Had she been another piece on the board? The weight of the truth crushed her chest, but she couldn't let herself falter now. She couldn't afford to break. Not when she was so close to the final piece. Henry's smile faded as he stepped even closer, his tone dark and venomous. You've been searching for answers, Lisa. But the truth is, there's only one answer that matters. You're going to die. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. Lisa's blood ran cold, the walls closing in on her with every passing second. She had to act. She had to do something, anything, to stop him from finishing what he had started. Her hands shook, but as she reached into her pocket, she felt something. The key her mother had given her. The one thing she had overlooked in her desperation to make sense of everything. It was a small, inconspicuous object, but it was the key to unlocking the final layer of the conspiracy. She held it tightly, the cold metal grounding her in the face of Henry's looming threat. As Henry took another step forward, confident that he had already won, Lisa's voice broke through the silence. I don't believe you. Henry's smile faltered for just a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. He had expected her to cower, to collapse under the weight of his revelation. But Lisa wasn't about to give him the satisfaction.
Not now.
Not when she had one last trick up her sleeve. I know what you're really after, Lisa continued, her voice steady, her grip tightening around the key. And you've been too focused on controlling everything to see it. But you missed something. You missed me. Henry's eyes narrowed. He took another step, but Lisa didn't flinch. She raised the key in front of her, and for the first time, the fear that had haunted her for so long was replaced by something else, determination. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and she saw it all so clearly now. The conspiracy, the lies, the people who had been manipulating her, it was all a smokescreen. A distraction. The real story wasn't about what Henry had done to her, but what she could do to him.
The key.
It wasn't just a key to a lock, it was a key to the truth, the final link in the chain that would expose everything. The moment Henry realized his mistake, it was too late. With a swift motion, Lisa inserted the key into a hidden panel in the wall, the one place she hadn't thought to look before. The sound of the panel opening was deafening in the stillness, and as the secret compartment inside revealed its contents, Lisa gasped in disbelief. There, sitting in the compartment, was a folder filled with documents. A file on Henry, on the entire operation, and most shockingly of all, on Tom. The truth was finally exposed. Everything Lisa had suspected, everything she had feared, was now laid bare before her eyes. But as she turned back to Henry, her heart sank. He wasn't backing down. The moment he saw the file, his smile returned, darker and more twisted than before. You think you've won? He sneered. You've only just begun to see what's really at stake. And in that instant, Lisa realized the game had only just started. The room was silent now, the tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Lisa stood there, the file in her hands, her body trembling with both the adrenaline of survival and the crushing weight of the truth she had uncovered. Henry was no longer smiling. In fact, he had retreated into himself, his cold, calculating expression gone, replaced by something closer to desperation. He knew, deep down, that the final battle had shifted. But it wasn't over yet. Not entirely. Lisa could feel that. She could feel the weight of all the lives that had been manipulated, controlled, destroyed by the conspiracy he was part of.
Sarah.
Her mother. And even Tom, who had been just as lost in this tangled mess as she was. It was all there in the documents. Everything. The names, the dates, the involvement of people she had trusted, and the layers of deception that went deeper than she had ever imagined. But what Lisa had come to realize in that moment wasn't just about the information. It wasn't about the revenge or the justice she thought she needed. It was about peace. For her mother, for herself, and for Sarah, whose fate was still uncertain. With a calmness she hadn't expected, Lisa took a deep breath, the air filling her lungs as she turned to face Henry. His eyes were now cold and empty, like the man he had become. She didn't have to say anything more. The file she held was the last piece he had left to control her. It was the last thing he had left to use against her. But as she stood there, staring at him, something shifted. The final moment was slipping away. She wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. Not after everything. "I've already won, Henry," Lisa said, her voice stronger than it had ever been. "You just don't know it yet." There was no reaction from him. No surprise, no anger. Just that empty, hollow gaze. Lisa's heart beat faster now, not out of fear, but because she was finally letting go. Letting go of the fear that had controlled her, letting go of the doubt that had clouded her mind. The truth was painful, yes, but it had set her free. The man who had orchestrated all of this, who had tried to ruin her life, was powerless now. And though she wasn't sure what the future would hold for her or for Sarah, she knew one thing for certain: she would never be the same again. The police arrived shortly after, the file in her hand providing the evidence they needed to unravel the rest of the conspiracy. Henry was arrested without a fight, his empire of lies crumbling before him. But as Lisa was escorted out of the building, her thoughts weren't on the victory she had just claimed. They were on the quiet moments she would need to heal, to process everything she had learned. Her mother's death, Sarah's disappearance, the endless hours of chasing shadows and lies. Lisa was finally able to return to her life, but it wasn't without its scars. The memories of the past would never fully fade, and the loss of her mother and the torment of those she loved would always linger in her heart. But there was a lightness to her now, a sense of freedom she had never known before. She had faced the darkest parts of herself, and in doing so, she had defeated them. As she walked away from the building, the cool night air filled her lungs, and for the first time in months, she felt a peace she hadn't even known she was searching for. The case was closed, Henry was gone, and the secrets of her past had been revealed. But as she glanced at her phone, a message appeared, sent from an unknown number. A simple phrase: "You're not done yet." Lisa froze for a moment, the weight of those words sinking deep into her chest. Had she really won? Was it all truly over, or was there still more to uncover? The uncertainty of that message clung to her, its implications heavy with the possibility of more lies, more dangers, lurking just out of sight. The relief she had felt moments before began to fade, replaced by the ever-present realization that the truth was never fully complete, that the web she had uncovered was only one part of a much larger picture. And as the screen on her phone went dark, Lisa couldn't help but wonder if, deep down, she would ever truly escape this twisted, tangled world. Or if the truth would always be just out of reach, pulling her deeper into its grasp. The silence of the night seemed to answer her. And in that silence, the questions would remain. Was she free? Or was this just the beginning of something much darker than she could have ever imagined? And with that final thought, the screen faded to black.